Welcome to Taking the High Road, a special show dedicated to the trucking industry, specifically at the confluence of recruiting, retention, and compliance. In the fourth year as the host of this show, I bring over 2 decades of industry experience, both on the carrier side as well as the vendor side. And each week I interview industry experts and thought leaders who bring their insight to the driver lifecycle as we discuss the industry's greatest challenges. I always appreciate your feedback, good or bad. Don't forget to rate and review Taking the High Road on your preferred platform. If you're watching on YouTube, please go ahead and smash that like button now. I'd also like to thank and highlight the show's valuable sponsors. Their dedication and commitment to the industry and to the show is greatly appreciated. And if you're interested in being a sponsor of Taking the High Road or joining me for an interview, please email jeremy@takingthehighroad.com. Now, this is an interview I've been excited about for some time. This week, I'm honored to be joined by someone who I can't help but describe as trucking's modern-day Renaissance man for reasons we'll soon get into. Michael Lombard, president of Lombard Trucking. Great to have you on the show, Michael.
Man, I'm glad to be here. What an intro. I mean, you got me blushing over here.
All right. Well, we'll see, because we got plenty more to go. You know, I've been following you from afar, and I'm excited to get more up close and personal with you as we talk about your background, how you got into the trucking industry, your experience as a professional driver, a staunch driver advocate, a recruiter, a fitness coach, a podcast host. I'd also like to talk about some of the things you're most passionate about, and I have a feeling we may not have enough time to get into everything given what I know about you so far. And then we'll also answer a question from a listener during our deeper dive segment. Are you ready to go?
I'm ready to rock.
All right. Well, I start every conversation with a book recommendation. So I know you've got plenty. Can you share with the audience a book that you've read that was impactful?
Absolutely. Right up at the top, and this is on brand for me. You have to absolutely go out and buy Napoleon-I Life, biography by Andrew Roberts. That right there. Just life-changing information, really separating the man from the myth, surrounding Napoleon, kind of giving a really good oversight, and especially because of the recent letters that have come out from Napoleon, and Andrew Roberts really leaves no stone unturned. He writes very similar to, say, Chernaw did with Grant and Hamilton, with cross-referencing letters from different officers and other leaders and really finding out the truth behind the man as opposed to some of the myth that's been carried on throughout history. And for the most part, it tells the true story and the true history of the time. And not only just if you're a history guy, but if you're somebody who's, looking at, just overall leadership traits and somebody who's, how he carried his life, and as short as it was, and only passing away in his, his early 50s, just how he stayed, what he was able to accomplish in that time, and his leadership style and skills, and his, as a communicator. There's just so much to take from it, whether you are just into history or, you're somebody who's trying to round out maybe how to deal with issues with your business. I mean, it's just a wealth of information, and it's truthfully a story that, even though it separates man versus myth, it almost seems too amazing, especially down to the military engagements, to seem true, but it's fascinating. It was very life-changing for me. I always tell everybody, you got to.
Love it. Yeah, I appreciate that. And you referenced like similar authors like Chernow, which means the book is quite exhaustive in the sense of it's a heavy one if you buy the physical version. Otherwise, the Audible, I think, is 20-ish hours. But like always, I listen to almost every Audible book about 1.5 speed because I'm no fool. I can make up some time. Besides being one of a kind, who is Michael Lombard, and how did you make your way into the trucking industry?
So what's crazy is with who I am is that all the credit goes to my family. The original Lombards who came over from Italy actually as Lombardo and removed the vowel as a business decision. Somewhere in the early 1900s, and when it comes to starting who I am, what's crazy is I've been known on the internet as Lombard Trucking since 2010, since I made a Twitter. And the reason behind why I made that my name, as random as it was, I had military truck driving licenses. I had driven some trucks in the Marines. I was an artilleryman in the Marines, but we tow cannons. So I drove Humvees and some MRAPs and stuff. But that wasn't why I had made that my name. It's because my family used to own a company, the original Lombard Brothers Incorporated, or what was known as Lombard Trucking, which started by my great-great-grandfather, Nicky Lombard, and his brother, John. They got to the U.S. in the early 1900s, and essentially Nikki and John, they began peddling ice out of a horse and carriage in Waterbury, Connecticut, and up in the Litchfield Hills. And eventually they incorporated in 1923 as a motor carrier. And throughout that time, throughout the 20th century, Lombard grew to being one of the largest motor carriers in the Northeast. They had terminals from Baltimore to Maine, Portland, Maine, 10 or 11 terminals in 10 or so states. I have an old notepad that actually has some of the cities on there that they were in. And my grandfather, who I grew up with up until my about mid-20s, he was one of the owners of Lombard as well as a driver for Lombard for 30 years. And unfortunately, Lombard was a casualty of the Motor Carrier Act of 1980. They were a Teamster affiliate, and they were sold to North Penn Transfer out of Carlisle, Pennsylvania in 1984, and North Penn Transfer dissolved in 1991. So Lombard, faded off into the abyss. And essentially, what kind of made me was I got out of the Marines. I went to college. So kind of what got me into Lombard Trucking and how that came to be. I started working for a wholesaler in a warehouse shortly after college. I was there for 3 years. I started interacting with a lot of drivers, and that kind of was the spark of kind of what set me off to think about this. So especially think about logistics as a career. Because I was doing a lot of the purchasing. I did a lot of inventory control, the ordering, a lot of stuff that was going in and out of the warehouse, picking up, I dealt with LTL carriers. I dealt with central distribution, and basically, long story short, came into a turning point, offered a promotion to run a warehouse in North Jersey, negotiated salary, didn't go my way. So at that point, I kind of, I was about to turn 30. I knew I needed to make a move. And, I kind of hit a crossroads in my life where at 30, you're thinking I had just gotten married too. And I need to pick something and just go full steam ahead. And at that point, my wife and I made a decision. We're going to move to Central Texas. I'm going to give trucking a shot. I was in the military. I've traveled before. I've gone on several, road trips. I'm very comfortable being in, different places. I have an allure of travel. I said, you know what? I'm going to give it a shot. Even though my grandfather told me all growing up, he said, don't do it, never do it, don't get involved. It's not what it was when I drove. The government got involved and they screwed everything up. I can't even explain it to you. And, but I ignored it because I wanted to see the truth. And I've had this name on the internet, and I was like, I need to live up to it. So I just made a conscious decision. I'm going to start a new career. So I did it. I moved to Texas towards the spring of 2020, got my CDL, and started driving for PAM Transport, went over the road from there, and kind of it snowballed because during that time, as I was getting my CDL, I was going through a fitness transformation. And when I went over the road, I had so many friends encourage me. They said, hey, if you're going to live this lifestyle, you should start documenting it. You should start talking about it, especially if you're trying to stay in shape. And I shied away from it. But, eventually I was like, you know what? I might as well. There's people who make, YouTube videos of, wherever they are in the world. I could start doing it. So I just started the podcast to make this, to start telling a story. Well, rolling into it, as I kept going, telling my story, eventually one of my best friends, who I grew up with, he moved to Texas, kind of followed me. He does very well for himself. He's been wanting to get into, invest in some businesses. And he asked me, he said, if you were an owner operator, could you do it? And I said, no, I know. I've been studying. I've been listening to podcasts. I kind of know how to underwrite a business. I had, done a lot with managing the business back at the warehouse in New Haven, Connecticut. I said, no, I think I could do it. I have a good network. I've kind of grown a network of talking to drivers. I could do it. So we kind of went in together, 50-50 on it, probably at the worst time. I got the truck in spring of April 2022. And at that time, rates were still doing okay, but, fuel had started to really surge in price. So the cooling process started. And over that time, so once I got the truck, that's when I started really just opening up my books. Like, I want to talk to everybody I can. I want to do it. And as I was telling my story and going on YouTube, that's when I figured I need to take this show in a different direction. Because so what had happened was, and what I had noticed there are a lot of YouTube people over since COVID who really like grew in celebrity type on YouTube. And then all of a sudden, when the fuel prices went up, they disappeared. They just fell off the face of the map. They fell off. Now, me, I wasn't, this is what's crazy. I didn't know a lot about the markets or anything or how crazy volatile it was. I didn't get into it because I heard that there was a gold rush. I got into it because of my name, solely because of that. It was something I felt passionate about, a way to honor my family, honor my grandfather, and try to do something with my name. And so when I saw all these people who I was trying to learn from disappear, I said, you know what? I need to take this show a different direction. We need to start advocating, because the fuel was going up. And with the fuel going up, that's when I started learning and talking to people about some of the, other issues going on in the industry with, when it comes to, the retention issue that's going on, because I started taking my show in a different direction where I was going to start. I said, no matter what, whether 1 or 100 or 1,000 people see this video, we need to bring attention to some things that are going on and how it is out here. And so I started talking to more drivers, and I started learning and networking more. And that's when I realized that there's some other big problems out here. And that kind of that's how the foundation was essentially laid out, that kind of launched me into advocacy. And I really say that the start, like who is Lombard, who's Michael Lombard, really became something in that summer of 2022, because that's where it really started. That's when I was on my own, figuring out $6 a gallon diesel. I had to really learn and shoot from the hip at that point. And, I kept moving forward from there, and just from networking, talking to drivers, going on Twitter, being active on LinkedIn, really beefing up the TikTok, especially in regards to fitness. I just started to learn so much about the retention issues. And then I started really getting in on the health focus, because while I was over the road, I read the Goggins book, and I said, now I have to be crazy. So I started training for the marathons, and I started training and running in marathons. And that's when I started to learn about essentially the fitness side of the industry, where essentially, everything in regard, basically the lifestyle of a truck driver reduces life expectancy. It takes, upward 10 plus years off their life. Essentially all of, when it comes to all of chronic disease or illness, high blood pressure, obesity, heart disease, any sort of chronic illness is almost double or very much escalated from what the normal population was. And I learned that. And that's when I started to kind of link the two together to kind of form a little bit more of who I was, of how personally, I think when it comes to, as a society, when people are put down like this and are sick and tired and suffering from mental health, some of it starts to become a little bit by design, where, we've forced this lifestyle on a demographic where now they put themselves in a position to not want to fight back or advocate for themselves, so to speak. And and that's when really that brand started to super emerge going into 2023 of, I'm going to lay on the foundation of fitness, of how drivers can now better advocate themselves. But along the way, I knew I couldn't do this alone either. And as great as it was, at the end of the day, I face reality. I know what it takes to grow a brand and content on social media. I think I'm doing all the right things. It's definitely a time game. But I look back, I'm not Kylie Jenner. I'm not as appealing on the eyes, so to speak. So
beauty's in the eye of the beholder.
So I knew it would take some work, but I couldn't do this alone and on my own. And I want to do it organically. I'm never going to, who I am online is who you're going to get in person. So I don't want everyone to sacrifice my integrity or change who I am for anything. So I don't like to sell out or kind of, show poor taste in that regard. I ended up meeting some really great people from going to the Mid-America Trucking Show back in March of 2023. And along the way on social media, I came across with Lee and Lisa Schmidt, who have been advocates for 7-8 years going to DC on their own. And we've gotten part of an organization called CDL Drivers Unlimited, which is an organization trying to build itself up as something for an organization drivers can join, similar to OIDA in a way that has something to offer drivers with membership, but at the same time also is actively advocating for, drivers in DC and also at the local and state level. And kind of from there, this entire, all of these things happened in such a short amount of time. And that's kind of, what it made me to be. And kind of bridging it all together, I think, the moment I got my commercial driver's license is really when I started to become, that's when I went from like Mike Lombard to being Lombard Trucking. And that's kind of who made me, when I really feel like I found my purpose through getting involved in an industry that, what I love about this industry and is with logistics, especially with the team over at FreightWaves and so many different people, is when you show passion and interest or general anything, people are attracted to that, and it gets conversations going. And on top of it, when you come at it from an angle, because the fitness side is a whole other angle that just never gets brought up, even on the brokerage side, even on the other side of the truck, because people in warehouses, brokers, they're also working kind of, odd hours, overnight shifts, brokers on demand, and that falls lax on them too. So this message and what I do is for technically everyone, and kind of rolling into why I've leaned into fitness more to kind of bring us up to present day. So while I was driving, I saw the writing on the wall with dry van rates at the end of 2022. There was no peak. There wasn't an increase. Volume had started to really dip. And I knew going into January 2023 that there was going to be some problems. So I was leased onto a carrier I was a company driver for. Great outfit, R&R Solutions out of Gravette, Arkansas. They really helped me out getting started. I built good relationships with brokers there. That got me really hot, to know kind of the business. From there, I had a friend over at Warren Transport, another owner-operator, contractor-only company similar to Landstar or Mercer. Warren's based out of Waterloo, Iowa. I got into some flatbed, RGN step deck style freight, because I knew there was a little bit better money in it. And things started out great. And for the first, half of 2023, it was awesome until I was backed into at a truck stop in Iowa by a gentleman. I'm not sure. It was broad daylight. There was several empty spots. Regardless, I was eating dinner and my curtains were closed and I started hearing crunching. And luckily, no damage to the motor, but it did, the headlight was busted. I completed the delivery up to Thunder Bay, Ontario, came back. I had to get it fixed. And I was down for a bit dealing with insurance. During that time, I knew, okay, I'm down. I'm not driving. What can I do? So, and here I am trying to tell drivers to be in shape. So I went to, the American Council of Exercise, and I got myself a fitness certification through them, which allows me to, coach at gyms and kind of builds a legitimate scope of practice I can get into with at least feeling comfortable, coaching drivers. And so I had gotten that. My truck got fixed. I got back over the road. At this point, this is where kind of my name's been getting out. My show's picked up a little bit of traction, especially from the trucking show. My TikTok grew over 10,000. So I started meeting a lot of people. I got in the wheelhouse of Charles Gracie, who owns Hot Seat Services recruiting company. I've been talking to other different brokers. We've been building this network, and I go back out on the road. And when I got back out, the volume further began to tank. And this is summer. This is peak flatbed oversized season. Rates had been cut from tractors I was hauling in the spring, were, cut by essentially almost a third than what I was doing just a few months prior. And I was invited to speak at a CDLLife.com event in Kansas City for it was a recruitment summit. And I was asked to speak on a driver panel. And I spoke on it, and there was a bunch of different carriers there. And we talked about the issues with parking, pay, benefits. We really did a lot. And I kind of didn't hold back there. I let my true feelings and myself come out there, kind of echoing things other drivers have talked about on my show. And I had so many people tell me, a lot of people thinking about what you're saying, but you're the only person who is saying it. And let me know I was on the right path. But when I was there, Charles had approached me. He said, hey, I think you'd be, what's your plan? What are you looking at for the next couple of years? And I told him, I said, I don't know how much longer I can drive, because I'm lucky, I'm fortunate. My wife does work. I'm not the single, I'm not the only income in the house. So I was fortunate in that sense, but I was essentially working that whole summer, skimming off the top for groceries. Everything had to go back to the truck. It was essentially saving away for possibly the next breakdown, the next whatever, the next PM. I had to get everything to the truck, and I understand there's risks involved, but at that point, I realized I could either, with how the market turned out, and I believe I'm right, I could have either broke even now, got off the road at the end of summer, or I could have prayed I could break even a year from now. I wanted to get in the business to grow. I wanted to try, if I could, do everything I could to make Lombard a motor carrier again. I'm in contact with somebody about trying to regain ownership of that MC and the ICC number. And that was really what I wanted to do. I would have loved to have done that. Maybe if I started a little earlier, I think if I started years ago, that could have helped. But I can't. That's hindsight 2020. That was my idea. So if I'm not just going to stay in business so I can keep a job. There's no point. So it became a sunk cost fallacy. I'm just putting money into something that's never. There's no way to really dig yourself back out, because if I kept going, I'm risking the life of the engine. And it's just, if all I'm doing is saving up for possibly another down payment on a truck, I'm trying to grow. I want to build a company that, a carrier that treated drivers like how my family's company treated drivers. Lombard, the original Lombard is a company, drivers stayed for 30 years. They didn't quit. They had the best job in the business. They had everything. And if I'm going to be in business, that's what I wanted to do. So I diverted. I was offered a job to come on to work as a recruiter. And what's great about that was I'm able to see other parts of the industry. At the same time, I was also offered a job by an Orange Theory gym back here in Austin, Texas, because of my personality, because of my brand, because of who I am on social media. So, and that right there in the summer of 2023, when I realized that I was just reached out by two different entities in two different industries who specifically said, we want you to come work for us because of who you are, because of what you stand for, based off of my own merit, not experience, not, my resume, not where I went to college, not my GPA. Literally, they said, you'd be great at it because I see who you are on social media. I see the brand you're trying to build. And that's when that true pivot really kind of took place to, if I'm going to do this thing, if I'm going to keep going, I'm going to build this foundation, backed by the fitness industry, staying involved in the logistics industry, of trying to going from, I went from Lombard Fast Motor Freight, which is an old logo my family's company had. And basically I've essentially changed it over to now it's going to be Lombard Fit Motor Freight. I'm going to grow this brand. I'm going to do what I can to advocate for what's got, for drivers, for the industry. And I'm going to keep doing what I can to get drivers healthy and to just keep the conversation going in this industry with all different things going on. And I think along the way, if I can build that foundation, the door's never shut on becoming a carrier. But in a whole, I know we've been going for a while and I've been talking. That kind of sums up, and it's crazy because it's a lot, because I have only really talked about the last essentially 3 years, plus a little bit back to the early 1900s. But that rounding out, that's kind of formed who I am. And the advocacy part, the reason why I'm passionate about it is because it works. It works if you give yourself, you have to have patience. And when I met the Schmitz, when I saw what they have done, going to DC, meetings like people like Senator Cruz, we got involved and we started just talking. And as we started talking, we started reaching out to politicians. And we have a direct contact now with a congressman out of Oklahoma, Josh Pertine. We're having regular conversations with some of these people and their staff, to the point at which there have been bills come across the House floor and they're calling CDL DU before they're calling OIDA and ATA. So that tells me right there, this is something that has real potential. And if you just don't stop, then I think that there's some real change that I could do and a lot of people could do just by that consistency. But I've been talking.
You have answered literally every question that I had prepared for you with all that you've shared, all of the different facets that you've gotten into from a podcast standpoint, from a health and wellness standpoint. Who is Michael Lombard? And by the way, sadly, this show is too short because there is so much more to unpack. And there's going to be additional conversations with you for sure. I think they have to, and especially around the health and fitness thing, because I think you and I have a similar passion there. That's something that I've become more and more passionate about, especially when you know that the life expectancy of a CDL driver is 61 years old. That's just unacceptable. And I love that that's an issue and a motivator for you as well. We do have 1 minute left, and I want to ask you the deeper dive question. This is a question that's submitted by a listener, and this is the deeper dive segment, which today's deeper dive question is brought to you by Career Now Brands. And the deeper dive question is, it seems no one wants to drive anymore. What can we do to attract more and especially younger drivers to the industry? With a minute left in the show, what do you think, Michael?
Yeah, it's a really good question because it's circumvented around everything that I'm trying to do. Number one, motor carriers. If we're looking long term, because at the end of the day, we have there's a huge divide between Chicago-based carriers who are offering you endless miles and money, and then we have the only gateway in the industry is through these mega carriers. But clearly we see what the downfall of the Motor Carrier Act has done to the job. It's become unsustainable. It's cutting people's lives short. It's having them get off the road for health issues. So something needs to happen between carriers and their customers to give drivers a legitimate schedule. They need I hate using the term work-life balance, but drivers need actual schedules they can go on and contingencies in place for breakdowns in regards to pay or maintenance and things like that. But the schedule kind of needs to shift. There are people who live and die by the road. I get it. They live out there. They do that. That's the 1% of the 1%. And we can't base retention and recruitment off of the survivability bias. Just because 2 people are happy and made it doesn't discredit the 2,500 or so who failed and quit. And so to make the job more attractive, you need to keep the equipment right. These people need legitimate schedules. They need a livable wage out there, something. And they definitely need help benefits wise. And they need staff on the other end who's giving them just as much support. But I mean, I can tell you when alleviating the stress from the job, that's why people are leaving, the stress. Undetermined pay, parking is a major issue. Being under the watchful eye of the electronic log and driver-facing cameras has deterred veterans. It's had veterans quit the industry. All these little things. If we want to keep drivers in, if carriers are looking to keep drivers, we want to attract younger people. Talk to the people driving now. Get the info from them, and then that'll get the next generation set up for the future to keep driving. Because I know some people think robots are coming soon. They're not coming as quick as people think. We're going to need people especially for OTR type regional positions. We're going to need this for at least the next 30 to 50 years. So if we want to solve the problem now, talk to the people driving now who are all telling you the same things when it's down to parking, pay, the workplace environment, bathrooms at shippers and receivers. I think that's the best. That's where we start. And I know that we can talk on those for longer, and hopefully I can come back on and we can talk about them. And the health thing, I know we're running on time, but just for any driver out there listening, for anybody listening, people think, and people get trapped in this in their 30s and 40s where they're like, I need to work, I need to make this money. If you don't do the right things now, if you don't get your steps in, if you don't start maintaining a healthy lifestyle, you can work hard in your 30s and 40s. In your 50s, and in the twilight of your life is when it catches up. When your kids are grown, when they want you at their swim meets, their baseball games, maybe they play in college, you're not going to be able to. So you do the hard work now, you do the hard things now, and it's going to pay off in the long run for everybody.
100% agree. And that's an excellent take. Michael, first of all, thank you so much for joining me. I love your passion and appreciate the difference that you're making in the industry. Thank you.
I can't appreciate you enough for having me on. We're going to do this again. And I love the start of this relationship.
Likewise. And thanks for joining me for another episode of Taking the Higher Road. Stay tuned for next episode as I'm joined by Rochelle Baker, Director of Culture and Driver Services with Canadian-based Seiza Trucking. And once again, special thanks to the sponsors of the show. We really appreciate you. If you're interested in being a sponsor or joining me for an interview, please email jeremy@takingthehigherroad.com. Until next time, thank you for taking the higher road.